There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, today we're doing the story of Ruby Franke and her partner in crime, Jodi Hildebrandt. Maybe you wouldn't call it crime, but they've both been arrested, and they're sort of co-defendants. Well, it'll probably be very probable that one or both of them will turn against each other when they see who's going to be the most culpable in this act of treachery.
Parenting YouTuber Ruby Franke and her business partner Jodi Hildebrandt will be back in court tomorrow. The Washington County Court will review if the two women will be allowed out on bail. Franke, a mother of 6, and Hildebrandt are charged with 6 felony counts of aggravated child abuse after their arrests on August 30th at Hildebrandt's house in Ivins. Officers say Franke's 12-year-old son escaped through a window and ran to a neighbor's home, pleading for food and water. Tune into ABC4 News for continuing coverage on this case. We'll, of course, continue to update you right here on air and always on.
So today was supposed to be a court appearance for a bail hearing. However, the attorney for Ruby Franke decided that he wasn't quite prepared for today's court appearance, so he put it off. Now, these are very, very, very serious charges. They're supposed to appear again tomorrow, and this is for a bail hearing. And the trend, of course, nationally is that almost everyone gets bail, unless they can say you're a danger to the community, or you're a danger to yourself, or they're a flight risk. You're getting bailed. That's just the state of criminal justice in this country at this time. So we fully expect them to get bailed tomorrow. The other point is their children, 2 of their children that were removed, are still in the custody of, we would say, Bureau of Child Welfare. They call it something differently in Utah, but it's the same exact thing. So they are in the custody and protected. So there's not a chance that Ruby Franke is going to get custody of the kids, at least now. I believe her husband, Kevin, who has been separated from her for at least 13 months, going on 14 months, he's trying to get custody of the children, but nothing with child welfare moves quickly. So we will be watching this case. And of course, tomorrow will be a big hearing, and we'll determine whether or not, or almost certainly, they will get bailed. With me tonight to discuss this case is straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad you got me on this one. This is a very disturbing case. I really want to dig in.
Absolutely. I mean, it's in so many ways, this whole social media thing. It's such a powerful, look at us. We're on social media right now, YouTube. But there's so much power with this. And when you drag kids into it, it can be especially disturbing because in the case of Ruby Franke, her kids may not have been willing participants in this charade. And the point is that she was using them to make a lot of money. At one point, she had over 2 million listeners. And then she goes into partnership with Jodi Hildebrandt, an alleged, and I say alleged, therapist who did have a license to be an MSW, to treat people, marriage counselor, family counseling. She was horrific at her job. She caused more damage than she alleviated. So some of those things are going to come out. And the fact that she was somewhat of an advisor to Ruby Franke, that also is going to come up in this case. Who twisted who? Did Ruby Franke twist Jodi Hildebrandt, or did Jodi Hildebrandt twist Ruby Franke's mind to do what she thought was best for herself and her children. That is that, Phil, we've seen this no matter what crime it is. We've seen where the co-defendants, they do this, they each
Yep.
point at each
Mhm.
other as the most culpable one. Your thoughts?
Oh, my thoughts. Well, right off the top, Bill, you mentioned that Jodi Hildebrandt is a licensed psychologist or whatever title she holds. Now, the minute that she is introduced to these two young children and the condition that they were found at her home, and she didn't pick up the phone and dial 911 and say, I need to report child abuse. I mean, that's just beyond the pale. The way that these children were found is just outrageous. You mentioned we call it Bureau of Child Welfare, Child Protective Service, whatever it is. There was a petition in 2022 from 18,000 people online that were watching the podcast that Ruby Franke was conducting. And they signed the petition to please have Child Protective Services investigate the way in which she was disciplining her children. So the red flags were there in 2022. Why nothing was done sooner just boggles my mind. When you find a child with tape and bruises and cuts and malnourished, this is not something that happened overnight, Bill. And you and I both have experienced this. This is something that takes place over a period of time. And the husband, I mean, thank God family court is going to move at a slow pace to determine where these children will end up, because we don't know that he didn't have knowledge of this himself. Apparently, the older daughter went on social media after the arrest and said, almost like eureka. I forgot the exact term she used, but thank God something happened today. So there was knowledge of this. I just can't fathom that children could have been left in this condition under these circumstances in that atmosphere for such a long period of time.
Phil, I 100% agree with you. I think the husband, even though he's been out of the house for 13 months, going on 14 months, I believe he's culpable also. He knew what was going on. He was part of these podcasts. He didn't see the abuse. If he didn't, he's an incredibly weak and naive man. And the fact that he didn't see his family for 13 months, what's that all about? Was he afraid of his wife? Was he afraid of Jodi Hildebrandt? Was he afraid of the Church of the Latter-day Saints? Was he afraid of them? What was his reason for staying away from his family? You couldn't keep me away from my family with a, 10
I was
wild
just going to
horses,
say that. I was just going to say that, Billy. Children at that age, once they're adults, all right, there could be a little period of time. They're busy with their lives, or if they move away, whatever. I get all of that. But you're talking about small kids. I couldn't go a day without seeing my children. Now, God forbid, if I wound up in a separation or divorce with my wife, I would still insist on seeing them frequently as possible. So again, like you said, he's out of the picture. There's a lot more here going on behind the scenes than I think we really know. It's just, it tugs at the heartstrings. Look, we as law enforcement officers experienced a lot of years between both of our careers. We see a lot of things, but when you see children being abused, it just strikes a certain nerve in the individual. And it really, I think most people, and not only law enforcement officers, anyone, children are defenseless, they're helpless, so to speak, when they're in the care of adults that really aren't, looking out for their best interest, but they're abusive. So it really strikes a nerve with me. I'm sure it does with you, Bill.
Absolutely.
That she's manipulated him in conjunction with Ruby, that she's been kind of the spearhead toward essentially destroying his life and destroying.
This is the attorney for Kevin Franke basically stating how it was all Ruby and Jodi Hildebrandt have manipulated his client. His client has nothing to do with it. It's typical lawyer speak.
His family.
How did Jodi and Ruby get connected? Does Kevin know?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Is Kevin believing that perhaps it was Jodi who was manipulating Ruby in this? Or because it also sounds like Kevin feels he was manipulated by Ruby. Is it just all the blame on Jodi?
I think it was a team effort, but with Jodi being the spearhead and creating a situation that's just caused all of this destruction of his family.
Why does he believe that Jodi is manipulative? What makes him believe that?
Probably shouldn't go into that, but we recently reviewed on another website an interview with Jodi's niece, who described to the public exactly what she had done, what Jodi had done to the niece and her family. And we're hearing other information that she's done this to a number of families. And it wasn't until this all came to light that Kevin came to realize that his family had also been victimized by Jodi.
Have the authorities reached out to your client?
Oh, certainly. He's interviewed with them.
And they see him as a potential witness?
They haven't said that. He
You know, I think this attorney knows, and he's not being totally forthcoming, that's what an attorney should be doing. Kevin very well could get charged down the road. And that's part of the investigation. Of course, that's why they want to interview him. And they interview him as a witness. And there's a very thin line between witness and perpetrator. And once it crosses that line, they have to do something called read him Miranda. And at that point, he's going to stop talking, and he's going to now go be a possible defendant in this action. And so law enforcement will have to make a decision. How culpable is Kevin Franke? And do they need him? Is he that much more important as a witness than he would be to prosecute?
100%, Billy. And, when you're doing an investigation, you're going to go wherever the investigation takes you. Now, in this situation, I'm going to go talk to him and I'm going to ask him questions. When I see that he has given me information that puts him culpable for criminal charges, it's my obligation to inform him. Very likely you're going to be arrested. I'm going to read you your Miranda warnings. And now at that point, I would say to him, I've read you your Miranda warnings and I hope you understand them. And if you're going to make any other statements, it's going to be held against you. But do you want to help yourself, or do you want to, be a witness in this thing, or do you want to be a perpetrator? And lay that out, and we'll see where we go from there. Now, more than likely, like you said, Bill, he's going to clam up at that point. But with all the other interviews, like the interview of this Hildebrandt's niece, perhaps there's information that could make him culpable. So again, a lot of investigation has to be done. I could clearly state and see that if Jodi Hildebrandt's niece was a victim of some type of abuse, that could easily be brought out in a criminal trial against these two defendants.
100%.
He was interviewed with them the day this all occurred. He drove to St. George to get his children, and they met him and interviewed him.
I guess when people are looking at this and they know this is not an isolated incident, because you and I both know that the Frankes have been under a close eye for quite some time. There were people who suspected that the kids were being abused or were treated too harshly. So even putting aside the arrest of Ruby Franke, your client was receiving criticism for quite some time over the parenting techniques. What is his response been to that?
There hasn't ever been an allegation that Kevin Franke has ever physically abused his children. And
I just like to comment to that. There's something in the law called omission. And if you see abuse going on, and even if you're not the abuser, you have a legal
obligation.
It's an obligation to do something about it. So
exactly.
this attorney trying to say he never, but he's guilty through omission. Failing to act is omission.
I was jumping out of my skin as he was saying that. I'm so glad you paused it there, Billy, and you said what you said, because exactly 100% correct. Just because he's not accused of actually physically abusing the children, he has knowledge of it and he doesn't do anything about it. Oh my God, he is just as culpable. He doesn't have to lay a finger on those kids, but if he has the knowledge of it and he doesn't do anything as a parent, he's just as culpable. And quite frankly, he should be and may be charged.
Absolutely. And, although they may consider him more important as a witness and they may use him as a witness.
I think all these parenting complaints, those were investigated, and I think it's a subjective thing. Parenting, as everybody says, no one's ever written a perfect book on parenting. And so while there may be some criticism of their parenting as being too strict or too demanding, that's been looked into, and there were never any DCFS charges filed. There was never any criminal charges filed, and particularly, and I want to emphasize this, Kevin Franke has never been accused of physically abusing anyone, including his children, nor have there ever been any allegations that he was doing that. He doesn't condone that kind of thing. He's a good dad. He just simply does not condone physical violence or that kind of treatment of children or anyone.
And he's right now in touch with all of the kids?
That's all being sort of managed by the juvenile court.
Do they want to see him?
I can't tell you. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I know that he's.
Phil, part of this abuse also is the 12-year-old boy who escaped the home of Jodi Hildebrandt. He was malnourished. He had duct tape on him and signs of rope cutting into his skin. So, granted, Kevin Franke hasn't been in the home, or specifically Jodi Hildebrandt's home, and I don't know what the kids were doing there, which was 4 hours away from Ruby Franke's home, right? So, yeah, does he have a good defense? Yeah, but he was part of the emotional abuse from this podcast. And he can't deny that. It's right on the screen. They could, subpoena, search warrant, they're out there for all of those episodes and show that he was and is culpable for the abuse that went on that podcast.
Billy, when you described the injuries, I read deep lacerations to that little boy's wrists from being either tied or restrained with tape or rope. I mean, come on. Now, again, his attorney, I get it. He's trying to give his client a defense, or he's trying to speak for him, and that's quite okay. He's going to take a position that he's taken, and perhaps maybe he's more important as a witness to this stuff as opposed to a defendant. We don't know we don't have intimate knowledge of the case folder. We don't have that, that inside track on what exactly transpired or what the investigation is revealing. But I mean, when you read these allegations and you hear the descriptions of the injuries that these children were subjected to, makes your blood boil. That's all I could say. It just really boils my blood.
100%.
He's had contact with his two older children, but as to the four younger ones, I even if I knew, I kind of made an agreement with the court that we wouldn't talk about the kids.
What about the older children? What has been the conversations between them and Kevin?
Well, they're kind of on their own, but they've had contact, but I'm not at liberty to disclose those conversations.
I mentioned the criticism that the Frankes were facing. The YouTube channel that they had was shut down. Did Kevin ever explain to you why that happened?
No, I have no understanding as to why that was taken down. I know after these incidents at Ivan's, I believe that a lot of their material was taken down by the platform, but I haven't spoken to Kevin about that. I have no understanding as to what's going on with that right now.
The money that they made off of the show, I think Ruby had claimed at one point they were making a significant amount of money. Has Kevin ever spoken to you about that, about how profitable that show was?
Kevin was simply giving his earnings to Ruby that were going to support the family.
That doesn't even pass the smell test. That's not even remotely the truth. I mean, someone that has a YouTube podcast that has 2 million subscribers, they are making serious coin. I'm talking $500,000 to $750,000 a year they're making. And I could be underestimating it there. So for this lawyer to say he has no idea about the money, he just gives it all to charity, just gives it to his family. I mean, look, he's an attorney, and we know attorneys, they spin things, and that's exactly what he's doing. But again, to put this on the straight and narrow path. Of course, Kevin Franke he's not under arrest at this point, but is he culpable for what happened to these children? And the answer to that is absolutely. And whether or not that he gets charged will be a determining factor on how valuable he is as a witness.
You know, Billy, one of the things that, I mean, maybe you know better than me because I really didn't do a lot of research on this case. The lawyer didn't mention that he reported to Child Protective Services that he believed the children were under the hands of some type of abuse. Had he done that, perhaps that would exculpate him from criminal liability. But I don't think, from what I just heard, that that's the case. I mean, do you know for sure if he reported anything, Billy, the husband?
I don't know. I don't know. But that would also,
Okay.
if I was in law enforcement, that would also to me seem like a smokescreen to try to get yourself out of the pot, out of the hot water, because he is culpable. And, by reporting it now that he's been gone for 13 or 14 months, that looks almost like a technique to just get him away from being prosecuted.
And I would think that his attorney would say, well, 6 months ago, a year ago, last week, whatever it is, my client reported to the police, reported to Child Protective Services that he believed that there was some type of abuse going on. Now, if he didn't have contact with the children for 13 months, it's possible he wasn't aware of it, I guess. But it just seems like very unlikely. And again, you talked about the monetary part of it. They were making a lot of money off this podcast. Going along with the program was maybe what was going on with him. Again, I just hope that the investigation will tell us whether or not he had knowledge of it and if he's culpable. And hopefully, if he is, there will be charges going forward.
Well, I want everyone that hasn't been listening to this case to actually hear the 911 call. That it's very extremely disturbing, and I'm going to play it because a neighbor actually is in tears during this 911 call.
This kid has obviously been. I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
We're taking a closer look at the case of Ruby Franke, the YouTuber mom now accused of child abuse. For the first time, we're hearing the chilling 911 call and emergency radio communications after Franke's son escaped from her business partner's home and was found emaciated with open wounds.
And he asked us to call the police. So he's very afraid.
That 911 call came in just before 11 a.m. on August 30th. A neighbor in Ivins, Utah, a remote area about 4 hours south of Salt Lake City, reported a 12-year-old boy showed up at his house asking for help.
911, the address of your emergency. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help.
The caller then references problems at the neighbor's home before.
By the way, that home right there is a $3 million home. The home that the boy escaped from that belongs to Jodi Hildebrandt. $3 million, and he's not being fed. So just extremely horrific.
Explaining the boy arrived looking emaciated with duct tape around his wrists and ankles.
We know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. He's hungry and he's thirsty.
Officials later determined the boy's mother is Ruby Franke, the YouTuber behind the 8 Passengers channel. Once boasting more than 2 million subscribers, the channel is now defunct after being terminated.
My gosh, you guys, having kids is so much fun.
On her YouTube channel, Franke documented the lives of her 6 children and husband, Kevin, recording videos about everything from home renovations to back-to-school shopping. But Franke's strict mothering tactics came under fire long before her arrest.
And my kids are literally starving. I hesitate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm like a mean barbarian, but I told the kids, I said, I'm not even going to let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
In the past, Franke had addressed critics, saying she wouldn't stop mothering her way.
Online who hate me, who would like to cancel me, who would like to see me either burn in hell, as I have told, or disappear off the face of the earth. And I'm not going anywhere.
But it was Frankie's own son who requested 911 be called.
And he asked us to call the police.
What's
So
his
he's
name?
very afraid. This kid has obviously been, I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Phil, what's your reaction to that? What do you think about that?
I'm furious. Her reaction to laugh off. I'm not giving my kids breakfast till they do their chores. I would like to do more than cancel her myself. I get the urge to want to put my hands around her throat, but obviously I would hold myself back from something like that. But it's just infuriating. It's terrible. But one thing that was said in that 911 call that really, really hit a nerve with me, he said, "We know there have been problems at that home before. I'm interviewing that guy right out of the box. I'm going to find out what he was referring to, and I'm going to do a very deep dive into the past goings on at that particular home, which I believe was Jodi Hildebrandt's home." And there's a lot of investigation that's probably taking place in this case. I would hope if I was involved in it, there's a lot of things that I'd be doing. Specifically, that 911 call that really was like a giant red flag for me. We know there've been things going on at that home before in the past. Very important.
Well, Phil, there's been numerous reports. The police have responded there. In fact, there was one occasion where the police responded there and they could hear and see the kids in there. And it was a report of that the kids weren't being fed, the kids weren't being taken care of. And the police responded and then left. And I, on another show that when I covered this, I said, I've been the boss on scenes like that. And I would say my next thing would be, 2-4 Sergeant, 2-3 Sergeant, Manhattan North Homicide Sergeant to emergency service, respond to this location. I want you to take a door. And boom, take the door down because they're not going to open the door. They're in imminent danger. That's the word that precludes a search warrant. If someone is in imminent danger, you do not need to get a search warrant. And guess who determines that? The patrol sergeant, right? Or the sergeant. Powerful thing to be able to decide. But the odds and just the fact that you're protecting someone's life, that's why that's allowed. And I can't tell you how many doors I took over my police career to protect children from imminent danger. ESU, boom that door. Although they actually have a tool, a hydraulic tool that just destroys the locks and quietly opens the door. So in this instance, I would absolutely do it because someone's calling from outside saying these kids are not being fed. They're being abused. And if they don't want to open the door because they're told by an adult who may or may not be their abuser, not to open the door for anyone.
Okay, don't open the door for anyone. But when you're getting that type of a call, you have an obligation to interview those children and find out if they are being malnourished. You'll look into the refrigerator, the cabinets to see if there is food in the house. You'll talk to those kids. How that wasn't done, that's I guess that's another thing that needs to be investigated. What was the type of call? Was it coming from an unknown call, or who made that call? And again, right away, like you said, Bill, you have to take the door, you have to go in, you have to investigate. Where are the parents? Who's home? Let's get them on the scene. Let's bring Child Protective Services involved. Let them do their thing. We have all these mechanisms in place to aid children that are in need. And we also have mechanisms that will protect children. And we have mechanisms to do investigations to find out if these kids are being victims of abuse. So again, it doesn't sound like those protocols were followed. I mean, I wasn't there, you weren't there, but what we would normally do is the things we're talking about now. If we're presented with a 911 call or some type of an allegation of child abuse, you go there, you investigate, you talk to, you check to see if there is food. Sometimes these allegations are false. Someone, has a dispute with a neighbor or a friend or relative, whatever it is, they make a call like that. Okay, but they had the obligation. They should have investigated this further. It sounds that way to me anyhow.
Mystique, thank you so much for pointing this out to it. It was her daughter that moved out, called saying the children were left alone for weeks.
Yes.
The police responded and the kids would not answer the door, so they left. Mystique, thank you for that. And as I said, I would, if I was the police on the scene, I was the boss, I wouldn't have gave the children the option of not allowing us in. I would have taken the door very gently, if possible, and so I could see what their condition was. They could have been at that point malnourished. They could have been at that point duct taped. They could have been at that point had cuts to their arms and legs. So if you walk away from a situation like that, which is the word imminent danger, they're in imminent danger. You can't really consider yourself a police officer if you walk away from a situation like that. I think that's horrible.
Right. We need the cops here as soon as possible.
First responder radio communications captured the moments after this 911 call came into dispatch.
Repeat said a 12-year-old male showed up with tape around his legs Thursday asking for help, said he was afraid asking for police. Deborah, he gave the name of Russell Franke, unknown date of birth, or he did give us a date of birth, but I'm not showing any Russells in Stillman. I'll keep looking into that. The RP said he left through the porch of the neighbor's house.
First responders can then be heard discussing the boy's wounds, saying he has sores all over his body.
Does have duct tape around each ankle. He's not telling the RP why, and said that there's sores around his wrists and ankles. He's becoming, or correction, the RP is becoming emotional.
Then, for the first time, Ruby Franke is mentioned by name.
Sorry, the RP said that he left from a neighbor's Jodi Hildebrandt in Ivan's 54-year-old female. Not sure if they're related. When asking the RP's current info, he said his mom is Ruby Franke, unknown where she lives.
First responders also mentioned Jodi Hildebrandt, whose home Franke's son escaped from. Franke and Hildebrandt have a past relationship, collaborating on parenting videos.
Do you have an address for that, Jodi? Tampa 8.
Anytime you think I want, fill in the blank, I don't care what it is, that is not love. Love is a gift that you offer because you have generated it inside yourself. And how do you generate love? Well, the only way to generate love is you use your agency to choose principles of truth.
Agency. What the hell does that mean? What therapist uses the word agency? Where does that come from? Is that Freud? I never heard Sigmund Freud use that word agency. This lady's a monster. She's an absolute monster and has destroyed lives. And I hope she gets the maximum penalty of law when she gets convicted, because she will get convicted. And she is and you know something? Maybe she did mind control Ruby Franke. Maybe she didn't. Maybe Ruby Franke was a willing and active participant. But this lady is an absolute monster.
First responders then mentioned the boy's siblings, who are still back at the home.
He's also saying that there's two of his sisters are back at the home as well.
Officials say when they arrived to the scene, investigators went to a nearby home, finding other children in similar conditions. In all, 4 children were eventually taken to the Department of Child and Family Services.
10-4 3 minutes, medical's in front of me.
Recordings capture officials arriving to the scene when they see the 12-year-old boy's condition firsthand.
Hey, 314, the wounds on his leg are pretty good. 12X511, 314, medical's going to transport him. Said that his wounds are in need of immediate care.
Next, there's some confusion as first responders ask for a Rose Franke rather than Ruby Franke.
Confirming Rose Franke.
But officials quickly realize it's Ruby Franke that they're looking for.
Stella Stillman, I don't have any Rose Frankies coming back in Stillman or in Utah. I did find a Ruby Franke, which I sent to 12X11.
Calendar page, it's a principle of Latter-day Saints. You have agency or the ability to choose. We all do. However, you have to be old enough to know what's going on. A 6-year-old can't decide everything for themselves. Calendar page, thank you very much for that input. However, Jodi Hildebrandt is a licensed therapist, right? And being such, she has a license to practice, to advise people, to use tried and true methods. These methods, if they're interspersed with religion, they're cultish in a way. And I've covered this story before, and I've had many people respond and say the Church of the Latter-day Saints was referring clients to Jodi Hildebrandt, and they fully knew what she was doing, and there had been numerous complaints. She destroyed marriages as well as destroyed families with her, with her license to practice therapy, MSW, Master of Social Work, whatever it was, as a counselor, as an advisor. She obviously, making kids, not allowing kids to eat, withholding food for them as a punishment. And she was the one who advised Ruby Franke to do that. And this term agency, that term itself just bothers me. It's like such a word that has nothing to do with love or with families, but with methodology. Exactly. And it's really pretty sickening, Phil.
Well, right off the bat, she's considered a medical professional. She has a license to be a therapist. And there are laws that state if you have information that someone is going to harm themselves, harm others, or if they're in grave danger, specifically with children, you have an obligation to report it to the authorities. And apparently she didn't. And I can't even imagine if the Church of Latter-day Saints was referring other parishioners to this woman for therapy, the harm that she may have caused. So again, I think the investigation is really widening. A lot has to be done in this case. You hear about duct tape being on that child. I mean, if anybody at home that's listening to this takes a piece of duct tape, just wrap it around your finger or your wrist. Try and get it off. Usually duct tape is very strong adhesive. You're definitely going to pull the hairs out of your skin, and you may even pull some of your skin off. So again, you could understand there being what they referred to as deep lacerations in the child's wrists, whether it be from ropes, duct tape. Imagine duct taping a child, a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old. Just very, very disturbing, troubling. And I think the abuse was far worse than we were just hearing about when you think about it. So again, this couldn't have taken place in a short period of time. It probably culminated over many years. And I really would like to see some heads roll with regard to whoever it was that had the opportunity to uncover this sooner and didn't, whether it be law enforcement or child protective services. Heads need to roll in a case like this.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you're new to this channel today, put a 2 in the chat. And all of our old timers, put a 1, because we know you're here, but we know who you are. But just put a 1 in the chat. And folks, if you want to subscribe to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And if you want to join our YouTube family, we have a YouTube channel memberships with, count them, 5 different levels. You see the folks in the green font. They are part of our YouTube channel memberships, our subs, our friends, our subscribers, and we really appreciate them. This just is a really horrific case. And no matter how we cover this, there's no way to sort of soften it up. It is bad. And someone said, oh, they should go right to trial. This isn't going to go to trial for a long time. The next phase, of course, is the bail hearing, which was supposed to take place today and didn't, because Ruby Franke's attorney wasn't prepared for it, knowing all of the voluminous amount of information that he had to sort of study up on. So it's supposed to be tomorrow. That's just for the bail hearing. Will they be bailed? I think there's probably a very good chance that they will get bailed.
Out of Springville, however, only involvement is a traffic offense a couple days ago.
Additional first responders again comment on the boy's condition.
Public 11, 3 and 14 as well. The child looks very emaciated.
Officials then discuss the next steps, deciding the boy needs medical care.
Or you want medical to hold off to transport to the hospital?
We need to get some photographs first.
Definitely. We're going to have him hold here.
Yeah, if he's alert and breathing, just hang out and wait for us, please.
According to a press release, the boys' condition was, quote, so severe that they were seen by the Santa Clara Ivans EMS and transported to a local hospital. Eventually, the conversation comes back to Franke and Hildebrandt over the radio.
After doing a little digging, it looks like that 27 I sent you for Ruby Franke is going to be the one that is associated with the Jodi Hildebrandt. They're both showing as therapists from Salt Lake and associated through social media as well.
Control 1211. Does she have an address in Springville?
Yeah, 10-4. She's showing up in Salt Lake per her Facebook. Her and Jodi both are therapists showing addresses up or locations for their work up in Salt Lake as well.
Copy, yeah. 10-4. That's going to be the mom. What's the address for that Jodi Hildebrandt?
Sorry, which address for Jodi?
Do you have an address for her in Kansas?
Yeah, 10-4. She's just a few streets up showing the address of.
At this point, first responders search Hildebrandt's home.
7 keyhole there. We're searching the house.
Both Franke and Hildebrandt were arrested on August 30th and charged with 2 counts of aggravated child abuse. Those charges have since been upgraded, and now they each face 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. If convicted, that means they could spend 15 years in prison and owe a $10,000 fine. Right now, both are being held in the Washington County Jail. Reporting for Law and Crime Network.
So, folks, one of the other things that, as part of this investigation, of course, is that the children must be examined, x-rayed. They could have old broken bones that they don't see right away, that maybe could have healed. They have to do a total interview, a forensic interview with these children. And then these children need to get counseling immediately. It's not normal for your parents or your caregivers not to feed you to the point that you're malnourished. That is so horrific in itself. Besides the potentiality of those other wounds, old wounds, that's just a step, a checklist thing in a child abuse case, is that the child needs to be x-rayed and also examined, for SA, which it could potentially have happened also. Now, when you look at these two and you see the faces of these two abusers, you almost think, oh, they look like such nice people. How could they do that? And these are the faces of people that do things like this, and you can't be disarmed by it. And again, there is Jodi Hildebrandt, an absolute monster. And when we play some of her, what she did to her niece, it's just, she sounds like a Nazi prison guard, with some of the things she did to her niece. And to put some of these theories to work on young children is just beyond the pale.
Billy, this is way beyond being a strict disciplinarian with a child. This is obviously way past that. But when you talked about the physical examination of children, you talked about the x-rays, and it brought me back to a very famous case in New York, I think it was about 25 years ago or more, the Lisa Steinberg case, where Joel Steinberg had physically abused this little girl. She was killed. Hedda Nussbaum, I believe, was the child's mother, was also very severely beaten. The x-rays showed fractures and broken bones that had healed. So there was obviously a history of the physical abuse. So again, a lot has to be done in this case. To think that these things can go on for extended periods of time and no one rings the bell and says, hey, there's something going on here, needs to be looked at, and get the children out of that environment. Thank God, though. Thank God we're not going to have the result that we had in that case where little Lisa Steinberg was eventually did succumb from injuries. So these children were pulled out, they were saved, and hopefully, like you said, with some counseling, they could go on to be healthy and lead normal lives.
Where 2 YouTubers, Ruby Franke and her business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt, they were supposed to appear in court today for a status hearing. The pair was charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse last month. Franke is the mother of all 6 children who were allegedly abused and was arrested after her malnourished son escaped to a neighbor's house asking for food and water. Frankie's daughter was also found malnourished at her business partner's home as well. According to authorities, Frankie's son had open wounds from being tied up with duct tape on his wrist and his ankles. Well, we have our very own Sierra Gillespie, and she is in St. George, Utah right now. So let's check in with her. Sierra, what is going on out there? What happened to the hearing?
Yeah, Terry, this morning we were expecting to see both Hildebrandt and Frankie here at the Washington County Courthouse in St. George. It was expected to be a bail hearing, but just hours before that hearing began, we were told by officials that it had been postponed. Just in the past hour, I spoke with Douglas Terry, and he's the attorney for Jodi Hildebrandt. I asked him why this hearing was postponed, and he said because of copious amounts of evidence in this case. There's just too much to go through. Originally, though, the hearing was expected to be a bail hearing. So Judge John Walton would have determined whether Hildebrandt, Frankie, or both were eligible for bail. And if they were and it was posted, they could have been released as early as this afternoon. However, they're still being held at the Washington County Jail because this hearing never happened. Also at the hearing expected today, it was possible that Judge John Walton would have set a preliminary hearing date. And that, of course, would be to determine whether there's enough probable cause to move forward in this case. But there was speculation that there would be pushback in that end of things because the prosecution was asking for more time. That's what's interesting, is that this hearing was postponed because of all of the information. Now, I mentioned that I spoke with Terry, who is the attorney for Hildebrandt. I asked him why this hearing was postponed and whether he wanted to speak on camera. And what he told me is he was uncomfortable speaking on camera because he still didn't know that much about the case, which really goes to show you the amount of evidence that we have here. 3 weeks ago is when they were arrested. Terry, you spoke about it just moments ago when that 12-year-old boy broke free just about 20 minutes away from where we are right now. So that's been about 3 weeks that both sides have had to go through all of this evidence. It just goes to show you just how much there is in this case. As of right now, there's no official hearing date set for the future, but the motion that was filed stipulated that it should be set after October 5th. So that's almost 3 weeks away from right now, but still no official date set.
Well, that's all very interesting. I do want to ask you just a couple of questions. If they actually did not go for the hearing today, do you think that they will try to get another bail hearing? Maybe, obviously, they will go straight to the preliminary hearing, but I'm sure that their attorneys want them to be out of the, jail at the moment.
I would think, and of course this is speculation, but that Hildebrandt and Frankie aren't used to the conditions that they would have in a county jail and would assume that both of them are hoping to be eligible for bail. So I would think that defense attorneys at this time are pushing for a hearing like that so that their clients could potentially be released. But when I spoke to Terry just moments ago, he didn't make any mention of that.
Exactly. All right. And the other issue I was wondering about is everyone was expecting this bail hearing. Were there a lot of spectators out there? What happened to them? It looks a little bit quiet behind you.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up. Right now, there isn't much action here at the courthouse, but I arrived at about 8 o'clock Mountain Time this morning, and that was several hours before the hearing at 11 o'clock. Already, there were people who were inside, a handful of people from different stations, networks, reporters, but also a handful of local people who've been following the case and even knew about the Frankie and Hildebrandt situation prior to the arrest, back when it was 8 passengers on the YouTube page, or whether it was Jodi Hildebrandt and the connections videos that she made with Frankie. So there is a lot of local interest in this case, and people were planning to sit in on the hearing.
Okay, we will.
A lot of questions from the chat, folks. A couple of you asked, why did both of them wind up in the jail hospital? Very smart prisoners know to try to go sick so that they can spend their nights in a nice, warm, comfortable bed, rather on in a prison tiny cell. That bed, if it even has a mattress, it would be amazing. So they're not used to that. So they're probably smart enough to say, oh, I don't feel well, I want to go to the infirmary, where you would be treated much nicer and you'd have much better accommodations than you would have in the jail cell. Phil?
Billy, I'm glad you referenced the chat. Marilyn Monetta put a quote in the chat a little bit ago. did the school report anything? Did the school district report anything to the police about abuse? Now, I don't know a lot about the case. Like I said, I just researched it earlier
Phil,
today.
they were homeschooled. Some
I
of the
was going to
kids
say they were
homeschooled.
homeschooled. Okay. I thought
So
that's what I
they
read.
weren't even allowed to play with other kids. So obviously they were hiding some of this abuse. There have been numerous reports from the public based on the 8 Passengers podcast that they were being abused just based on how she was treating them on that. They've gotten numerous calls. The police have responded numerous times. It was felt that someone was protecting them. And many people have pointed to the church that they were protecting this type of behavior. Look, they were referring clients to Jodi Hildebrandt. So is anything else out of the realm of possibility?
It's completely outrageous to think that anyone, anywhere, whether it be a church, a neighbor, a friend, a relative, would protect such horrific abuse of children. It's completely outrageous. Just boggles my mind to even think about something like that. And I know that now you informed me that they were homeschooled, so I could see where if they're not reporting to a school every day, a school would pick up on something like that quick. They would have the social workers or perhaps a notification to Child Protective Services probably right away. That was one of the things that probably aided in the abuse of these children, that they weren't enrolled in school, they weren't going to school. Now, I have nothing against homeschooling. Actually, I think it's quite popular today with all the stuff that goes on in schools today, or indoctrination and such. But again, had there been some type of a visit from Child Protective Services, perhaps this wouldn't have gotten as far as it had got.
Is speaking out. Ruby Frank's sister posted the video response on her own YouTube channel.
News special Shelby Lofton tells us the claims that she is making after this arrest. Shelby?
Mike and Dini, this is really the first time that we're hearing from a family member who was really close to Ruby Franke. Her sister, Bonnie Holeen, her sister's name, made regular appearances in her sister's vlogs, and Ruby regularly made appearances in hers. Holeen says that their relationship drastically changed 3 years ago, and today she's breaking her silence.
What my family and I have gone through the last couple of weeks is the worst thing that has ever happened.
Ruby Franke's immediate and extended family are known for putting their daily lives online. Her sister says so much was kept behind the scenes for years.
We did not have access to anyone.
Police say they found 2 of Franke's children in the basement of her business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt's Ivan's home, emaciated with wounds all over their bodies.
It makes me tremble because it is unheard of.
Bonnie Holeen says she thought Hildebrandt and her business connections were extreme.
It was complete indoctrination.
She says as an aunt, she did everything legally possible to protect the children.
And for those that were saying that they'd go in and bust down doors and do whatever it took to end up in jail, because from jail, I can't do anything.
She points the finger at her brother-in-law, Ruby's husband.
It was Kevin's job to check in on things, and he did not.
He was just simply following what she and Jodi were telling him.
Kevin Franke's attorney says the father of 6 did whatever Hildebrandt and Ruby told him to.
He was being berated and belittled and torn down by Jodi, and constantly being told he was selfish and greedy and he needed to repent.
Kester says Ruby told her husband to move out of the family home.
If you want to stay married and you want to patch up our marriage and make things work and help our children, you'll stay away.
He says Kevin didn't see his children for a year. Kester says Hildebrandt brainwashed Kevin.
He's trying to seek professional help.
Franke's sister says there's more than one person to blame.
Ruby and Kevin and Jodi and connections have been destroying our lives offline.
And Kevin Franke's attorney told me that Kevin has reached out to some of his extended family members, including Bonnie. He says he really wants to repair those relationships in order to move on with his life. He was not able to tell me if Bonnie received that request or responded to it. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Shel.
You know, someone in the chat, Erica Sandwall, is saying her family is a bunch of abusers. So I don't know anything about her sister who is pointing fingers at Kevin Franke and of course Ruby Franke, but they also, from what I understand, members of her family also have YouTube channels and are also sort of in this content creator influencer business. So is this the first time they've ever spoken out? Is this one of many times they've spoken out? I don't know. But I know for sure that there has been there's been other reports. There's been many people have reported this and nothing has been done. So that means either two things. One, they're very affluent and law enforcement or whoever is not laying a glove on them because of that. Or B, they're being protected by someone. And many people have texted us and said it's the church that has been protecting them. So I'm not making that up. I'm not purposely disparaging the church. Many other religions have major problems. For example, the Catholic Church with their pedophile problem. And many people refuse to talk about that and the way the church handled it or handles it by just transferring the abusers. So I'm not in Utah. I don't have first-hand knowledge of this, but many people have been texting us and emailing us and telling us that is the elephant in the room.
You know, Billy, I'm going to read a quote in the chat from Richella Pranzo. It says, at Phil Grimaldi, this is from Google. The Frankies have also been criticized for refusing to bring then 6-year-old daughter lunch at school after she forgot to pack one. I remember that now that I'm remembering some of the research I did. That was perhaps before they were being homeschooled. So again, there was some red flags early on. A mother is refusing to bring a child lunch that forgot their lunch. And I believe that she even disciplined the child over it for the fact that the kid forgot to bring the lunch. Early on, these things were the red flags. Maybe there was some type of a affluence in the community, and perhaps maybe it wasn't aggressively looked into because of that. Again, you brought up the possibility that the church was trying to protect them. That's also a possibility. We know, and we're not pointing fingers at anyone. We're not accusing the church of being complicit in child abuse. However, there have been cases in the past where things were covered up by religious organizations. I think that's the point you were trying to make, Bill. And again, just so many things here. I'm just glad that these children are not in harm's way at this point. They've been taken away. And hopefully, again, they can heal, they can go forward and be productive in life.
This is the niece of Jodi Hildebrandt. Let's see what she has to say.
She made me do 12-step because she was convinced I was an addict, like a drug addict as well. I'd never done drugs. I'd never had sex. Again, I didn't know that masturbation was even possible. I had no idea what these things were. So I just started making things up as a way, as like trying to get this to stop, because I had no one there to help me and to save me. And I think I even said that on the podcast that I was making things up. And when I spoke to the detective down in St. George days ago, I told her that as well. It's like and so even if he had confessed, it cannot be taken seriously because this child was being tortured. And I'm certain that she echoed those words of like, if you tell me, I will stop. So what is happening, it just echoes so close to home of what she did to me. And the repercussions, the emotional and physical repercussions of those actions, like the fact that she can, because the thing that's so sinister about this is that it can't be disproven. So even if like she goes to prison, his name is cleared, it will never be fully cleared because it cannot be disproven. So this is going to potentially follow him for the rest of his life. So even with those children being taken out of her care, she is still abusing them. And so with whatever is happening, whatever did happen, I can guarantee you it's not what she's saying.
Her business, Connections Classroom, is this the same approach she uses for all of her patients as well that are not family or not Ruby's kids, as far as you know?
I don't know the intricacies of what she promotes and what she teaches on Connections Classroom. if it's anything even close, then I mean, I'm certain that there's going to be parallels. I'm certain, I know that she believes that all shame should be punished. And I know that like that, so like I wouldn't be surprised. I really don't know. I've stayed away as much as possible from her and her world, to just heal and to try to salvage any life that I could possibly live, post living with her.
With that said, it sounds like this wasn't really a secret, though. Obviously, you knew about these teachings. Other people in her family, probably both families I've been hearing, knew about some of these practices or had heard of. Why do you think it took to 2023 for a child to escape, go to a neighbor's house, call 911, and now this is a thing? Like, why did it take this long?
I think it's a combination of quite a few things. One, the church supports her. She's been.
Boom. I didn't make this up. This is coming right from a victim of this abuse. And right there, so anyone in the chat that objects to us reporting that, we're not making this up. We're getting this from people telling us this. So we'd be remiss in our duties if we didn't mention it.
Promoted by the church. And
go ahead.
I just wanted to state, we're going into cultist territory when we're talking about all shames need to be punished. That's not religion. That sounds like a cult to me. I mean, come on. It sounds like there was some type of a morphed religious belief into a cultist type atmosphere. And again, like you pointed out, she's stating that the church is still behind her. So again, very, very disturbing to hear all of these facts.
And people trust the church. Members trust their bishops. They trust their stake presidents. And a lot of these people, most people that are going to therapy, if not all, are in a vulnerable position. And she is remarkably convincing. She is also terrifying if you cross her, because she has and will systematically destroy your life. She destroys your reputation. She destroys any of your credibility. So even because there are definitely people that have been speaking out against her. I mean, she lost her license because of someone speaking out in 2012. Like, this is not, she's not just, everyone's not just been like, okay, yeah, for sure, fair game, free for all. People have been criticizing her. That's just that no one has listened. Because one, we have a culture of people not believing children and not trusting children. And also children trust their parents, and then the parents trust the church. So there's been, and Jodi, what she does that's so tricky is that she utilizes and uses whatever is available. So if you go to her with OCD, if you go to her with severe depression, she'll use that information as a way of control. Oh, you have OCD because you have deep-rooted shame. And those tics are happening because the shame has nowhere to go. And so it's coming out in this, like, this neuroticism. And then, or let's say like, you told her that you lied, which is a normal human thing that we've all done. That doesn't make you a liar. Oh, well, you lied. You're a liar. Now everything you say is a lie and you can't be trusted. And she also separates people. She keeps people so they can't talk and corroborate. Like, it is so vile and tricky and ingenious. Like, Jodi is, she is a very unwell person. I don't know her exact diagnoses, but I know that she's been diagnosed with a plethora of things. And yeah, so it's devastating because I went forward as well. I mean, I went to the police when I was 16. I tried to do what I could, and no one believed me, because why would they? She destroyed my credibility. I was an angry teenager, and now I'm just you're just like an emotional, angry teenager and she had told people that I destroyed my family's life, that I destroyed my dad's life, that every person I come in contact, I destroy. So she sets up the premise. And then when I come forward and try to tell people, like, this is what's happening, she can be like, oh, see, Jesse's trying to destroy my life is what they do. It just all adds up. So she's so good at protecting those loopholes and discrediting people.
Is that why you think maybe other members of both families still won't speak out publicly about this right now and are staying quiet? Or do you think it's a fear thing or just want to stay out of it? Is there any thought process on that?
I can't speak to why people aren't. I know the culture of my family. I think that it's probably probably a number of things. Some people, I think it's just that they themselves have been harmed so much by her, and they want to stay. They just want to live their life and not be dragged into this. Other members, it could be fear. I can't say. All I can say, and again, the only reason why I'm coming forward, I was not planning on coming forward to the media other than just doing the podcast interview, is when I heard that Ruby accused her child of this, because and I just hope that this can give the public some context and some clarity of what is happening and why they should not believe her.
So 6 charges of aggravated child abuse. That's what's on the table. I'm sure you're not a legal expert.
Amazing. JK, Bill, you're totally on point. Unless you're in the thick of it like I am, it seems impossible that the church would allow this. Look, I believe that they allow it. I totally believe it. There's those that will criticize us for reporting this, and that's okay. You know, we're big boys. They used to say to us, cops have thicker skin than other people. And guess what? We do. But I'm not going to not report something that's obvious because we're going to hurt someone's feelings, you know, especially when it's obvious. And this, again, this person, Jodi Hildebrandt, is an absolute monster. And that was her niece, Jessie. She described all the things. She withheld food from her. She was duct taped. She was tied. All the things that these kids had done to them, she's describing that her aunt did to her. And really just more egregious than anything is that she destroyed her mind. She destroyed her confidence. She destroyed her being. She destroyed herself. And a therapist, obviously, that's the opposite of what she's supposed to do. Phil.
100%, Billy. And then she used the word in there, and I think that this word is going to jump out. Control. It was about control. She tried to control her patients. And again, using mind control, using manipulation. She appears to me to be the master manipulator. I agree with Billy. And again, need to interview her.
I'm sure they have, Phil. Phil, we're going to go to a quick commercial for Joe Murray.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Now, have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York City area? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only a very experienced criminal defense attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. So he literally knows both sides of defense. Joe is also on the boxing team. So if you need to have Joe on your case, perhaps he could deliver that knockout punch. You can get a hold of Joe at his website, jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you can email Joe at jmurray-law.com. Joe Murray is a big supporter of police off the cuff, and we think he's a terrific criminal defense attorney.
Absolutely. Joe Murray, if you're listening, thank you for all you do for this channel, all you've done for Police Off the Cuff. We really appreciate it. Well, Phil, that's about, our show for this evening. And I just want people to realize that we're trying to report this as we see it. Many things have been reported to us. I've watched episodes of the Mormon Church podcast, which goes into a deep dive with many of these complainants. So again, we're not inventing any of this. This is all out there, and this gets an assist in the arrest of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. And it may even extend to them once this case is really dug deeply into it and the investigation is completed. Phil, your final words.
My final words, just to sum up, it looks like we've really gone over a lot of the information that's put forward in this case. However, I think there's a lot of stuff that we don't know needs to be investigated. Perhaps it already has been taking place. And what we'll find out going into the future is going to be very compelling with regard to this case. I mean, some of this stuff that we talked about, the abuse, the cultist-like atmosphere with regard to the church. These people, Bill described them as monsters. I agree, Billy, 100%. These were two evil people that did some horrific things or allowed horrific things to happen to children. Hopefully, all the chips are going to fall where they're going to fall when the investigation goes forward. God bless these children. May He protect them. And I hope and pray that these kids can come out of this and be healed from it and have successful lives going forward.
Absolutely. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.